can't wait to make a video about a book that people seem to like that I don't get. That's right, my friends, we have to talk about Katabasis, the most recent novel by the author R.F. Kuang, who is a fantasy darling, a media darling, one of the up-and-comers in the fantasy/fiction space. I read half of The Poppy War. I truly could not get through it. And I have read Babel. That one I decently enjoyed. My wife has read Yellowface and has highly recommended it to me, so maybe I will check that one out. But today, we are going through a Katabasis review. I just wanted to give you a little bit of my background. I would not say I'm an R.F. Kuang lover, nor would I say that I am an R.F. Kuang hater. I have seen a couple different versions of criticism of this novel through those lenses, and I think that that is not valuable in any way, shape, or form. Let us discuss the book itself, and then I will get into a little bit of the metatextual stuff that's going on with this book that just seems a little weird for me. But first and foremost, we have to talk about the book. Did I like it? Not really. I will just spoil it right there for you. I gave it a 2 out of 5, which in my rating system means that I understand why other people like it, but there were a lot of things that did not work for me and kind of ruined my enjoyment is too strong of a phrase, but forced me to ask critical questions of this author and the reasoning behind writing this book. So let's start where most book reports should start, as my 3rd grade teacher says, with a plot summary. We're going to go no spoilers for a little bit, and when I get into more spoiler territory with some of the flaws and some of the things that I like, I will indicate. But first and foremost, a non-spoiler plot review. Alice Law is a doctoral candidate, I guess in real-world parlance, that's what you would call her. She is a student, she is a scholar at a alternate timeline version of Oxford, where magic is studied in the same way that physics, mathematics, rhetoric is studied. And she is working on her dissertation in a specific field of magic. Her dissertation advisor, a maverick, possibly sexist, most likely sexist, traditional, male figure of power in literature role. Those people, Harvey Weinstein-esque, you know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to beat around the bush to avoid the YouTube censors here. You know the person that I'm talking about. That is her advisor. She has worked under him for a little bit. He dies in a mishap in the lab working with a new piece of magical technology. And because she is so singularly obsessed with completing her dissertation under her dissertation advisor, she decides to use magic to enter hell and to get him and bring him back so that she can complete her dissertation and finally become the magic scholar that she has always felt that she is meant to be. Pretty interesting premise. Her fellow student, Peter, also being advised by this person who has died, catches on to the fact that she is going to hell. He also had a similar idea, and so they go together. And the plot continues on from there. Very much Dante's Inferno, very much Paradise Lost, very much commenting on the world at large through the scope of the 8-9 layers of hell, in the way that Dante would say, hey, look at this person who's still alive, who's in hell when I've gone to hell. That type of thing. So I guess I can't really get into adventures ensue. Can't really get into any more detail without getting into the spoilers. That is a very basic plot summary. If that piques your interest, I will say, go ahead and read the book for yourself. I think it is written solidly enough that I can confidently say, read the book for yourself if that type of story, if that dark academia style of story sounds like something you would be interested in, give this book a shot. There are a number of ways to find enjoyment out of this book. It is written in a way that is enjoyable enough that maybe you will like it more than I did. If you want to continue on to this review, we are now entering into some spoilers. We're going to start on the positive side of things with some things that I liked. Thing number 1, and the thing that made me read this book cover to cover to finish this book without DNFing, is that I love this premise. This premise is ripe for a reimagining. We have, obviously, like I said, Dante's Inferno. We have a couple of more ancient texts on the adventures of our mythic heroes into hell. Hercules, right? The 12 Labors, Orpheus entering hell to find his lost loved one. We have these mythic texts, but we don't really have a modern type of retelling of this. And so I was incredibly excited that Kuang was kind of taking this on, going to put her own spin on it. This is a fantastic premise. Unfortunately, For me, the premise was not fulfilled, but we'll get to that when we get to the flaws. Another thing that I really enjoyed, we are off and running from page 1. There's no throat clearing, there's no scene setting, she is basically doing a spell from page 1 to get into hell to find her doctoral advisor. I loved that pace. I have found myself asking just to get going with a lot of modern fantasy, and I really got to give Kuang some props on this. She knows what she wants to write, and she begins the story right at the beginning and gets us going. I found that to be pretty great. That is about where the things that I liked ends. I mean, there are some scenes here and there that I found to be pretty interesting. I particularly liked the Nabokov Lolita kind of shout out in one of the gates of hell. I thought that was pretty interesting. I know a lot of people have been kind of commenting on the meta-textual, the homework aspect of this book. I didn't find that to be incredibly off-putting. If you have a general knowledge, did you go to 10th grade of American high school, you will probably get a lot of the literary references that she is making throughout this book. I think that has been overblown by the critical community a little bit. You do not need a PhD in literature to understand a lot of these references she's making. Milton, Dante's Inferno, these are not like core obscure texts. These are kind of surface level texts that we, as Americans at least, are taught in high school. I'm sure around the world you are also taught this, so that was kind of blown out of proportion for me. So, there were some interesting scenes kind of playing on those tropes that I found to be engaging, to be entertaining, to be thoughtful and philosophical in some ways. That is about where the likes end. Let's move to the flaws. Just one more spoiler warning here. We are definitely getting deep in the weeds. Flaw number 1 is going to be my flaw with, I suppose this would be a flaw in the genre, but it is a flaw that finds itself squarely in the middle of this book, and the inability for there to be any stakes, for there to be any narrative tension involved in writing a dark academia, romance-specific style book in the modern age. There's a character, Peter and Alice. They get together. They are friends turned into lovers, thrust apart by individual circumstances that we're not really told about. And throughout the novel, they rekindle or kindle their romance. And then Peter dies. Peter is killed by a couple of wizards, I don't know, magicians, I guess is what they call them in the novel, who are also in hell, who are trying to make their way out. They have kind of turned sadistic. They are using the blood. You have to use blood to use magic in hell. So they steal his blood. They kill him. There is never a moment, never one moment in this book where you don't think that Peter is going to come back to life. Not a single moment. This may be me being incredibly cynical. This may be me being oversaturated in the genre and the inability for people to kill their darlings. This is a romance, obviously, so it would be bittersweet if the romance ended with one of them dying. But hey, maybe that would be an interesting take on the romance genre. Maybe Peter dies to sacrifice himself to save the one he loves, and through that, Alice, our protagonist and main character, can grow and evolve as a human being and can find love in different ways, maybe through friendship, through other people that she comes in contact with. Maybe she can grow to understand that the love she felt for Peter was more important than the sadistic drive to complete her scholarship. I don't know, but the main piece of it is, I'm not rewriting the book, but the main piece of this is, as a reader, we know that this man is coming back to life. 100%. There was never a doubt in my mind. So when he died, that emotion, the emotion that we are supposed to feel through Alice of the loss of someone she deeply cares for, is completely out the window, because the genre convention is that these two are going to get together. Now, if my expectations were subverted, I think that this flaw would have turned into a pro, something that I enjoyed. But again, towards the end of the book, what happens? Sacrificial swap of souls type spell, and the evil professor is used to bring the love interest back. Who could have guessed that that was where this was going? This was, if you can't tell, this is major flaw number 1. We need narrative tension. We can't just go through a book and just kind of la-di-da our way through everything. It greatly reduces the potential for me specifically to enjoy a piece of work when there are no stakes. And I feel like most of this modern fantasy landscape that I have been running across recently has no stakes, because there is a fear of permanence. There is a fear of death. There is a fear of removing a character from the board. And this is prime example number one. The second major flaw for me is that the idea of venturing into hell offers so much potential to create something visionary, entertaining, fun, to comment on the world around you through the adventure into hell. What makes Dante's Inferno so incredibly interesting is that he is using this imagined world of hell to comment on his real life experience with the people around him. That is vicious. He is pointing out people that he is going to come across or that are in positions of power, positions in academia, and saying, you are in this circle of hell because of the sins that you are doing. What an interesting and powerful tool to use. Kuang is taking that same approach and putting academia, skewering academia. This is such an opportunity for something incredibly interesting, but it is not used to its full potential, in my opinion. We run into maybe one or two classroom, lecture hall type settings that are really kind of just window dressing. There really isn't much commentary on academia. Sure, there's the burnout aspect of it is discussed, and the fact that you will sacrifice half of your life to finish your schooling. I get that. It's on the nose a little bit, but it works for me. I wanted more of that commentary. It felt like maybe she's in the middle, like halfway there, halfway not. Maybe she's still working through her overall feelings on academia. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but in the text itself, it was a little bit toothless. We didn't really get that same level of skewering that I was looking for. And maybe that's on me. Maybe that's expectations going in. Also, it was a little bit mundane. Give us the Bacchanalia. Give us what hell has been written about. If you're going to make all of these literary allusions, if you're going to harken back to these pieces of classic literature, to these myths, to Dante's Inferno, to Milton, there are no punches pulled. There is stuff that I cannot say on YouTube in these books. There was really none of that throughout this piece. And maybe that, that's the author's prerogative. But when I read a premise like what I read, I am assuming that we are going to get in the weeds with human depravity. And that really wasn't fulfilled. Third and finally, I'm finding myself asking who this book is for. Like I said, the literary allusions would make, and the fact that it's set basically in academia would make me assume that this was probably written for people who have gone through the process of academia. Sure, that makes sense, but then why are we not really leaning into that aspect? It feels like it's in this weird middle ground, this weird gray area where we're trying to, because the general audience, your general romantasy audience, I may be making some sweeping generalizations here. I get that, but most likely they're not incredibly versed in Lolita, in Dante's Inferno, in T.S. Eliot's work, in John Milton's work. Most likely they're not, as I've already commented on, I've seen a lot of talk about how this is homework. So if that's your core audience, you may have leaned too far on the literary illusion side of things. But if your core audience, if your expected audience was more of an academic-centered audience who may have that information in their back pocket, maybe we didn't go too far to that side of things. It feels like we were trying to kind of meet this gray middle of both sides of things and maybe didn't really hit. This is definitely more personal preference on my side, but as I was reading this book, just asking myself, who is this for? I really didn't get it. So if you can kind of enlighten me on where this book was meant to be positioned a little bit more, if you have some information on that, if you have a different read on that, let me know in the comments, because I'm still trying to figure it out, because this is an author who has such a high standing in the fantasy community for sure, but also just in the literary community in general, in the book community in general. Yellowface was a massive hit. Like, the Poppy War trilogy is thought of in this incredible light. Like, I don't know. I don't really know who this book was for. Please let me know if you have a better read on it than I do. One more quick flaw before we move into the meta reading of this book that I have seen a lot of people commenting on. We move away from the plot so often because our protagonists are introduced to a magical problem that they need to solve. But instead of watching them solve that problem, we're told that they already know the answer to that. They're so smart, they've already come across it. They've already done all of their research. I just found that to be a little bit superfluous, I guess, a little bit boring, for lack of a better word. Why don't we see them problem solving together, building their relationship together? Instead, we're only offer their relationship in flashbacks. The relationship doesn't seem to grow or evolve really at all through the first like 2/3 of the book until Peter makes his grand sacrifice. It just feels like we're leaning so much on flashbacks, on lab work. And to me, there is nothing interesting about that lab work. There's nothing interesting about Alice sitting in the library and coming across an equation. So then when we reach that point in the fourth circle of hell or whatever it is, where they come across the issue that they're trying to solve, she's already solved the equation in her library time, but we don't get to see any of that actual problem solving. I think that having some of these problems present themselves and then having the two of them work through it together with their superior intellect, but also with their schooling, kind of getting their dissertation on the fly through the challenges presented to them in hell, that may have been a more interesting aspect of the book. It may have allowed for more connection to be made, not just from reader to character, but also our two main characters to kind of grow in their relationship together. I don't know. I just felt like every time we were getting to something interesting and a problem was presenting itself, we would go to a flashback, or a character would brush it away by saying, Planck's constant, I remember this, da-da-da-da, write a little magic spell, and then the problem was instantly solved. I didn't love that. Let's touch on a little bit, this is a little bit beyond my purview, but let's touch a little bit on the meta aspect of this. I am not someone who follows authors on Instagram. I try and stay away from a lot of author-centric content. I more lean into the school of thought and criticism that once the book is out in the world, the author's intent is not as important as what the reader actually gets from the text. You can argue with me on that. I totally get that. These are two different schools of criticism, but I lean towards the death of the author, towards the fact that once the book is published and in the hands of the reader then kind of chooses where the book ends. I understand you may have a different read on that, but I have seen a lot of positive reviews for this book because readers have seen a reflection of R.F. Kuang's marriage in this book. She's an academic, married to an academic who is also dealing with an autoimmune disease. So it's not hard to see the self-insert of the author into this piece. Peter has Crohn's disease. R.F. Kuang's husband has gone through an autoimmune disease. Both of them academics, all that type of stuff. So are you enjoying this book because you like and enjoy your parasocial relationship with the author? No judgment, just a question that I wanted to ask, because that seems to be the only positive reviews that I have seen about this book have leaned heavily on the fact that this is a very personal story to the author. If that is the way that you criticize books, that's totally fine. That is your prerogative. My personal process for commenting and criticizing on books does not include that. So I really didn't know anything about this author. I did a little bit of research and found, oh, this is why all of this makes more sense to a lot of people. Because it's a self-insert. This author is putting herself in the world. That's her prerogative. That's totally fine. That doesn't really work for me. So that may be why, the main critique for me, that may be why I didn't really enjoy this book as much as I've seen other people enjoy it. Just my 2 cents. If you disagree with me on this, I totally get that. This is my particular style of commentary and criticism. You may want more of the author's thoughts. You may want more of the author's intent put forward to you so that you can understand kind of where they were coming from. The personal aspect of a story may be more important to you than it is for me, but knowing her personal story doesn't do anything for me in terms of enjoying the piece of text that I'm reading on the page, right? So I just, it feels a little bit too parasocial for me. That's just my 2 cents. Well, if you've made it this far, you either agree with me or you cannot wait to roast me in the comments for talking about your favorite book and your favorite author in a slightly negative way. I will say, I welcome your comments. Please, in good faith, argue down below. Let's avoid personal attacks for for the most part, but I'm not your dad. Say what you want to say down there. I would love to get a dialogue going about maybe why you enjoyed this book, or if you agree with some of my thoughts, please leave them down below. We open all forms of good faith argument down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're reading something very, very good. I will see you in the next video.